All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Adam Hops. I'm with the National Operations Center of Excellence. We're excited to host this webinar today on hurricane forecasting and the Total Solar Eclipse review. Big thanks to the FHWA road weather team, Jeremy McGuffey, and all the team that works to put this webinar series together. A few housekeeping items. First, the webinar is being recorded. This is so that we can share the recording with your colleagues and those who weren't able to make it. So that'll be available via our newsletter and website in the coming weeks. We do have all the Road Weather Spotlight webinars listed on our YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the chat box to access those as well. Be sure to take a look and make sure that you've seen all of them in the last year. And then I'll also put a link to our calendar so that you can register for any upcoming webinars, including more road weather spotlights that will be taking place this year. We will be using both the chat box and the Q&A. Please use the chat box for any technical questions or quick questions that you might have for me. If you have questions for the presenters, please put them in that Q&A box below so that we can help sort them out. We also have the opportunity to use closed captioning and live transcript. You can see them there at the bottom of your screen for anybody who'd like to use that. All right, I'm going to turn it over now to Jeremy McGuffey of the FHWA Office of Operations. Jeremy?
Hi, everyone. And Adam, I really want to thank you for helping us to host this today. Without NOCoE support, this might not be as successful as some of the other events. So appreciate you. I appreciate NOCoE. You guys do great work. As Adam mentioned, I do want to reiterate, if you guys are interested in checking out any of these other road weather spotlight webinars or any other webinar that our team puts on, go ahead to NOCoE's websites and look at their calendar of events. Today, as Adam mentioned, we're going to be covering the hurricane forecast for 2024 and the Total Solar Eclipse review. All right, and my name is Jeremy McGuffey. I serve as the Road Weather Program Manager at the Federal Highway Administration's Office of Operations. Go to the next slide. Before we get started, though, I do have to throw these disclaimers up here. I'll read through them real quick. It's just general disclaimer information. Essentially, it says this presentation was created and is being co-presented by both the Federal Highway Administration and an outside entity. The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are the presenters and do not necessarily reflect those of FHWA or the U.S. Department of Transportation. The contents do not necessarily reflect the official policy of the U.S. DOT. The U.S. government does not endorse products or manufacturers. Trademarks or manufacturer's name appear in this presentation only because they are considered essential to the objective of the presentation. They are included for informational purposes only and are not intended to reflect a preference, approval, or endorsement of any one product or entity. Except for the statutes and regulations cited, the contents of this presentation do not have the force and effect of law and are not meant to bind the states or the public in any way. This presentation is intended only to provide information regarding existing requirements under the law or agency's policies. So just a brief overview of what we're going to be covering today. As we mentioned, it's a combination of both hurricane and the total solar eclipse. So we have Mike McClelland here from Federal Highway Administration. He's going to be covering the 2024 hurricane outlook and also give you kind of an overview of what the emergency ops team at Federal Highway Administration does. Then we'll move into the total solar eclipse review itself. We'll give you a perspective from Federal Highway Administration, and then we'll move over to Team Indiana. Purdue University is going to be doing kind of a national mobility analysis, and Indiana DOT is going to give their perspective on what they observed and some of the preparation activities that they did as well. And then lastly, we'll come back and I'll do an update for the program here at Federal Highway Administration and some future activities that we have going on. So with that said, I am going to hand it over to Mike. I'll give a brief bio for Mike, and then we'll get started with his presentation. Mike serves as the emergency coordinator for the Highway Administration at the United States Transportation in Washington, D.C. Michael possesses 20 years experience in the fields of emergency management, national security, as well as administration. Prior to joining the DOT, Michael served at the Department of Defense as well as on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security, where he specialized in continuity policy and counterterrorism. And he is a decorated veteran of the United States Army. Thank you for your service, sir, and we will hand it over to you.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for that, Jeremy. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone today. As Jeremy mentioned, my primary role and responsibility here today is twofold. One, demonstrate how FHWA is postured to address hurricane season, and two, address where we've been and where we could be going in terms of this season. That being said, Emergency Operations Program. We actually fall under Office of Transportation Operations, which falls under the Office of Operations, under headquarters at FHWA. Slide, please. So on this slide, I really want to help understand where we're postured and how we're structured, okay? At FHWA headquarters, EOPS consists of 3 personnel. I'm the emergency coordinator. Jason Carnes is our transportation security coordinator, and Franby Franco is our cybersecurity coordinator. Folks, this is our bread and butter. This is all we do in this lifetime, so to speak. We handle nothing but natural disasters and man-made events on behalf of the administration. That's important to note because at the division level, we have field emergency coordinators and alternate field emergency coordinators. These individuals are fulfilling a collateral duty in terms of emergency operations. We have deputy administrators, we have HR professionals, EEO specialists, engineers, and financial experts, all working in a collateral capacity to support the emergency operations program for the administration. Now, we have 50 division offices, 1 for each state. We also have 2 division offices in the District of Columbia, as well as Puerto Rico. And we have 4 additional offices in Philadelphia, New York City, Chicago, and LA. So we have 56 total offices with field emergency coordinators and alternate field emergency coordinators. So things can get busy rather quickly, but we have the proper structure, proper staffing, spread across the divisions, spread across the country. Now, FEMA, as they approach hurricane season, they actually have their 10 different regions, okay? FHWA is a bit different. We have 4 different regions for the entire administration. We have the Director of Field Services for the North, South, Mid-America, and the West. I say that because when you talk to FEMA, you have apples and oranges. So our 4 regions have to talk to the 10 regions of FEMA. My teammates and I, Jason, Frandy, and myself, serve as that conduit to ensure that FEMA and the interagency and the bigger Department of Transportation has everything they need in the event of a hurricane, in the event of a bad day, at the regional, at the division, at the state level. Now, what's unique about this structure here at FHWA, which I've never seen in my 20 years experience, in the Army, at DOD, DHS, or bigger DOT, the Highway Crisis Advisory Team. If on a bad day, and forgive me if I keep saying the state of Texas, but I keep referring back to what happened this past weekend and earlier this week with Tropical Storm and Hurricane Beryl approaching the coastline of Texas. What we saw was essentially that the hurricane was going from a tropical storm to a hurricane, and that we might actually have to activate. I'll get to that a little bit later, but we were actually postured to hold what's called an HCAT, the Highway Crisis Advisory Team. Within a moment's notice, I could contact, along with my peers, front office staff, and we could assemble senior leadership from the administration to talk directly to that have impacted divisions, whether it was Texas alone or Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. We could get everyone on one team's call probably within an hour's notification. I've never seen this before in my entire career, this streamlined approach to ensuring that the end customer, the state, the civilian population has everything they need. The state level Department of Transportation has everything they need in a moment's notice. We can have the administrator, the deputy, as well as the executive director all attend this conference, or at least have representation from their offices, represent their office, and essentially ensure that the division office has everything they need to meet the needs of the civilian population. These meetings can go for 15 minutes, they can go for an hour or 2 hours, but this is an opportunity for the division level experts, the representation for FHWA at the state level, to ask the tough questions of our leadership to get the right answer to provide back to the state and the governor. Slide, please. Now, this is important to note because how we report information, that information comes directly from the division level and the state level up to us at the EOPS team, and we report that up to our administration team. We have what's called FHWA Order 5181.1 Charlie. Sounds very technical, certain aspects of it are, but it's a 12-page document that really highlight what our reporting requirements are of each state level division. That being said, the 3 points that I highlighted, there's 7 total on your screen. The first 3 that I highlighted are really what we'd be looking for in the event of a hurricane. Any closures to the national highway system beyond 8 hours, any damage to infrastructure, whether it's roadways, even bridges, or anything really generating national media interest or needs that we are at FHWA headquarters are not aware of, okay? The last 4 bullet points are really natural or not natural events. They're man-made events that we would really look at and focus on. So if in the event of a contraflow operations, if we have a crash involving 6 or more fatalities and 10 vehicles, we can report that. We would report that up to our colleagues across the administration and then report that up to the bigger Department of Transportation. Sometimes the DOT would report that to the interagency like FEMA or Homeland Security or even the White House Situation Room, just to make sure that we have visibility on what's taking place in that area that's impacted by the hurricane. In this case, this past week, it was Texas. Slide, please. So now that you have an understanding of how we're structured and how we report, these are the actual events that we take during significant incidents. Now, what I really want to explain is that there's a lot of information on this slide. The overall process is rather linear. So if the big Department of Transportation has a requirement, they'll come to the different modes of the department, the FAA, the Federal Rail Administrations, the MARADs, the Highway Administration. They'll come to us as the emergency response team members and basically say, these are the requests for information that we have. This is the information the front office is asking for. What can you provide to us? My colleagues and I would turn to the divisions that are impacted by the either natural disaster or man-made event, collect that information and report back up the chain of command, so to speak. So we serve as that conduit, we serve as that buffer, and we help facilitate those tough discussions for coordination, collaboration, not just with internal DOT components, but external like FEMA or DHS. Now, what we saw last Friday, around 8 a.m., I came into the office and I had noticed that the spaghetti models and the track of Hurricane Beryl, as it was coming across the Yucatan Peninsula, it was tracking a bit higher than what we normally thought it would be, or where it should be, rather. I knew it was going to sit in the Gulf of Mexico for a day or two and possibly get some rapid intensification, and I was a bit concerned. So about 8 a.m. on Friday morning, I reached out to our division office in Austin, Texas, and provided them a rundown on what we're seeing and what we're hearing from bigger Department of Transportation. At that time, there was no reporting requirement, but I at least advised our team members out in Texas that we might very well activate over the weekend, be prepared to, in the midst of battling a hurricane out your back door, so to speak, you'd be required to report up information to the bigger department. We got a thumbs up. Our division administration team was ready to go. They knew what was happening with the Texas Department of Transportation. They were reporting up in real time. Now, around 3 p.m., just before close of business on Friday, the Department of Transportation, OST, as you see on this slide, OST is the Office of the Secretary of Transportation. This element basically decided that they would send out an alert order. That alert order was a 2-page document basically saying within the next 24 to 48 hours, be prepared to activate and provide information in real time to the front office as well as the interagency. So we were waiting for that activation order all weekend. My peers and I were in contact all weekend with the Texas division of FHWA. The activation never came, and I was actually a bit surprised. This is the first hurricane of the season. Yes, it was a Category 1, and I've heard peers say that it's only a Category 1. But last I checked, as of 10 minutes before this briefing, there were 8 deaths in Texas this past week as a result of this just Category 1 hurricane. So this needs to be taken seriously, but we didn't activate, and we were still in contact with our administration team down at the division level. That being said, had we activated, OST would essentially expect prescribed timelines to be met by us, by other elements of the DOT like FAA, Federal Rail Administration, and really provide next steps for information collection and dissemination. We would assemble on what's called the Transportation Operations Center, or the TOC. The TOC is a 24/7 emergency operations center within OST. They're the conduit for the entire department. Information comes in and comes out from that one site. So essentially what would happen is myself and my teammates would either physically report to the TOC, or we would virtually dial into our seat at the TOC to basically provide the information that they're requesting. At the same time, DOT would deploy folks over to FEMA, the National Response Coordination Center, to provide support for what's called ESF number 1, Emergency Support Function number 1, all things transportation, air, rail, sea, and highway, okay? Now, anything that's done at the DOT level, we replicate here at Highway Administration. So in the process of actually deploying to the TOC or supporting the TOC, what we would do is issue what's called an IRO, an Incident Reporting Order. That IRO is the graphic you see on your screen. It's the first 2 pages that you see on your screen of what that document actually looks like. It looks very detailed. It is. It can be. I've seen documents that are 2 pages. I've seen documents that are 15 pages. It's really asking the divisions to provide the 5 W's as well as the how. What are you doing to support the state level Department of Transportation? How is your element, the division level, postured to address the situation? And really, what are your unmet needs? Okay. That information goes down to the division. They package it, disseminate it, and send it back to us at the EOPS team. What's important to note is that everything is done on East Coast time. I say that because that's where FHWA headquarters is, and that's where DOT headquarters is here in DC. So if we have a real world event in Texas, which is not East Coast time, or California or Hawaii, those folks out west are going to have to accommodate our timeline. So we kind of have to back everything up. We would work with our OST partners to figure out when that timeline would be to meet the threshold. Now, again, I've seen documents that are 10, 15 pages that we receive back from our division offices. We need to pare that down at the EOPS level to maybe 2 or 3 pages to submit it into what's called Web EOC, the Web-Based Emergency Operations Center. It's a portal of sorts that goes right into the Transportation Operations Center. So we have to pare that down. At the same time, our colleagues at DOT and the Transportation Operations Center are taking the different modes from across the department. They're taking those 15, 20 pages that are being submitted by everyone, and they're paring it down to a total of 2-page document for the executive summary that goes straight to the front office, straight for Secretary Pete, Deputy Secretary Trottenberg, as well as the different modes across the agency, but also across the interagency, okay? And that's key. I had mentioned earlier, as DOT activates, we activate with that IRO, Incident Reporting Order. We also have a different cadence or battle rhythm or discussions with our colleagues across OST, and that's also what's expected at the division level. So the FHWA Highway Leadership team assembles under the HCAT, the Highway Crisis Advisory Team, and we can actually talk to the division in real time on what they need, and we can provide supplemental reports to talk to support whatever's going into that executive summary for the front office. Slide, please. So now that you know how we're structured, how we report, and what's actually taking place during these significant events like a hurricane, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about where we've been and where we could be going in this hurricane season. Again, a lot of information on this slide. Anything in red is 2023 hurricane season. Anything in light blue is 2024. That graphic at the bottom of the screen from those 3 assets of those 3 stakeholders is really generating the report for what we're seeing for the hurricane season that we're currently in. Now, that first bullet point, on average, a season of hurricanes produces 14 storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. These numbers are from 1991 through 2020. So these are from 29 years worth of data. These are the average numbers. Last year for 2023, we saw an increased number of storms at 20. We saw the spot-on number average of 7 hurricanes and the spot-on number of 3 major hurricanes. So to some, that might not seem like an uptick, but to me, I saw the 20 compared to the 14 storms that we should have had from the past 29 years, and I was a bit concerned. To the far right, you see 7 named storms, 6 tropical storms, and 1 hurricane. These are the level of support, or these are the instances that we provided support from FHWA EOPS to ESF1, the TOC, OST, and the bigger Department of Transportation. What's unique about this on bullet point number 6, Tropical Storm Hillary? Folks, when you hear hurricane season, a lot of folks automatically think about the Atlantic Ocean, okay? But it's also the Pacific. We have typhoons out west. Tropical Storm Hillary was a hurricane and it approached Southern California and became a tropical storm, I think, in September or October timeframe of last year. It was unprecedented, right? On number 7, Hurricane Idalia came up the Gulf Coast, so to speak, and impacted Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, even North Carolina. But this is what we were addressing last year and making sure that all that information that's being requested of us is going down to the division level and coming back up so that we can ensure that the executive summary is meeting the intent of the secretary and the front office. Now, for 2024, again, we're seeing 20 named storms, so the same as last year, but we're seeing 8 hurricanes potentially. We're seeing 4 are going to intensify to major hurricanes. So that, in combination with the rapid intensification we saw last year on several storms, has me a bit concerned. We saw Hurricane Otis go from a tropical storm last year and just off of southern Mexico, went from a tropical storm to a hurricane category 5 in roughly 12 to 14 hours. That rapid intensification very well could have taken place this past week as landfall was made in Texas. Thankfully, it didn't. But again, as I mentioned, there were 8 deaths, and to me, that's 8 too many. Slide, please. So this next graphic is really what we saw last year. And folks, we were very fortunate. Puerto Rico was graced several times. We had several instances in the Gulf of Mexico, and Florida was certainly impacted by Hurricane Idalia. But if some of these storms had shifted to the left, the east coast of the U.S. would have absolutely been impacted. We would have been activated. We would have been supporting the bigger department, and we would have been supporting our divisions at the state level to accommodate those state level departments of transportation and the civilian population. On the far right, you see the wind speeds for the top tropical storms as well as the depression, and then category 1 through 5 hurricane wind speeds. And again, Hurricane Otis impacted Acapulco, Mexico, and went from a tropical storm around 73 miles an hour up past 157 miles per hour. So that was pretty quick for that rapid intensification. It'll be interesting to see what happens next year and what our 2024 slide deck for this might appear to be. But right now we're seeing a lot of activity coming off of the west coast of Africa and coming along the southern line of the Caribbean into the Gulf of Mexico. So it might be a busier season than normal for the Gulf of Mexico. Slide, please. So as we come to the end of my presentation, I really want to remind everyone that hurricane season is 6 months long. Folks have a false sense of security when they get to the fall time frame and they think that hurricane season is over. It's not. So these are 3 assets rather that I use on a daily basis during hurricane season to include nights, weekends, holidays. But National Hurricane Center, the weather.gov are 2 instrumental websites. I was really turned on to the 3rd web link last year. It's a Pacific-based warning measure that looks at Hawaii, Guam, the West Coast, the territories, as well as Alaska. This is the Joint Typhoon Warning Center from Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. We use this as a platform to actually look at a deeper dive of Tropical Storm Hillary and what was going to actually impact in Southern California. So we can make coordination efforts with our team out in California. And then we also use this to look at Hurricane Otis and what that meant for Acapulco, Mexico. Even though there wasn't an impact to the United States, we saw that rapid intensification as a real threat and something that we should prepare for later this season. Slide, please. To close everything out, I mentioned I'm one of 3 team members on the EOPS team. This is our contact information for Jason, who's a transportation security coordinator, Franby Franco as our cybersecurity coordinator, and myself as the emergency coordinator. If you want to reach out, by all means, don't hesitate. Both gentlemen have a wealth of knowledge and experience. If you want to reach all 3 of us, the best way to do so is that website, or at least that link or email address at FHWA_headquarters EC@dot.gov. You shoot us an email there, you'll get all 3 of us, and we'll be happy to help out. Subject to any questions, that's the conclusion of my brief.
Thank you so much, Michael. Adam, I'm not watching chat. Have there been any questions come through for Michael?
Yeah, just one asking about if the copy of operations plan for ERT activation and IROs, if there's a template that's available or can be viewed.
Yeah, so we definitely have templates that we can that are off the shelf, so to speak, that we can populate or accommodate, whether it's a natural disaster or a man-made event. We can certainly share those. Please send me an email, and I can make sure the proper folks get that. We won't share what has been done before, but we can share a template with the proper information for the 5 W's and the H accordingly.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, and if anyone's interested in contacting Mike or the rest of the EOPS team, after I move past the contact information here, just drop your name in the chat, and Adam or one of the other people that are moderating and watching chat can get you that contact information. Mike, I truly appreciate it. That was a great summary of what you guys do and also what's coming down the pipeline this hurricane season. I'm going to jump into the Total Solar Eclipse review. I might have to speed things up a little bit just to get us back on track, so bear with me here. As I mentioned before, I'm Jeremy McGuffey. I'm with the Federal Highway Administration's Road Weather Management Program. I'm also here today representing planned special events just for the sake of the Total Solar Eclipse and possibly some of the future activities that we have planned. And today I'm going to be covering kind of a lead up to the solar eclipse and then some of the outcomes of the solar eclipse itself. You know, to begin talking about the 2024 solar eclipse, we have to kind of go back in time to 2017 during the last major total solar eclipse. That provided us a lot of information. It provided us a great foundation for planning for this year's event. There was a lot of stuff that we learned and developed into best practices that we implemented, you know, going into this 2024 eclipse event. And I think that it paid off. Some of these, and I'm not going to touch on each of these bullet points individually. You can read through them. I try not to read verbatim. Some of the major ones, though, was messaging. The sooner we noticed that states were getting messages out to the public regarding you know, best places to park and getting to the event site early and leaving a little bit later, those really paid off. You know, it gave people an idea of what to expect and also some peace of mind because they understood that there was some planning involved in this event. They understood that there was going to be a lot of people out there on the road. You know, here in a little bit, I'll talk about kind of the differences between the two events that pose some challenges as well. But getting messages out to the public, and there was a lot of websites that dedicated themselves to it, a lot of groups that dedicated themselves to it. That paid off dividends. The other one that we learned about, obviously, was weather. With many planned special events, it's not as big of a deal. But when you are participating in an event that relies on good seeing conditions, obviously cloudiness or rain can impact folks' willingness to participate in a certain area. And oftentimes you'll find that people will pack up and move if they see the forecast is showing there might be clouds in the area that they're going to be at. So weather plays a huge role in that, and that was a lesson learned as well. Something that you might not think about is the border crossings. You know, something that is much different than other planned special events, and even the 2017 eclipse, was that this one started in Mexico and came into the U.S. through Texas and exited through Canada up near Maine. So you have to consider that there's going to be people traveling across borders, not just states, but also countries to reach those prime viewing spots. Okay. So as I mentioned, you know, this one was unique in just the path that it took, right? It traveled through Mexico, entered through the southern U.S. In Texas, and exited through Maine and into Canada, the Newfoundland area. It passed through the majority of 13 states there. It might have touched a few more, but the path of totality was quite wide. The big difference, though, if you're looking at the 2017 versus 2024 eclipse, was that it passed over many more densely populated areas. You start even starting down in Texas and going up to the Northeast there were many areas that were densely populated or near regional population centers. So there were many more people that were either located directly in the path or within a very quick drive or short drive to the path. And that led to an increase in attendance, over the 2017 eclipse. So from the 2017, a lot of information was shared as far as what was learned and best practices. We covered a little bit of it early on here. That was all shared and to these new state DOTs that were experiencing this for the first time. They started a lot of this stuff earlier than was what was done in 2017, just based on what they heard anecdotally. One of the biggest ones was involving all the necessary stakeholders. You learn this from participating in planned special events, is that it pays off to involve everyone that you can, even the smaller partners that you may not necessarily think of. With the solar eclipse, for example, some of the stakeholders involved, especially at the state level, might be the National Weather Service, first responders, perhaps, local and state public agencies, nearly every local and public state agency, federal stakeholders, FHWA is involved there, FEMA, DHS, non-governmental organizations. There's a lot of those involved. Third-party data providers. You can only imagine how many folks need to be involved to get the good information out to the motoring public. Law enforcement, construction and maintenance staff, contractors, trucking companies. The list is endless. But making sure that you involve all those people from the beginning and early on can really pay off when it comes to planning. As I mentioned, also, you have to plan for those day of impacts, the wild cards that it might get thrown at you. Those could be weather, traffic, natural or man-made emergencies. One of the training exercises that we did was for perhaps, EVs. What if there's a long line of cars and an electric vehicle breaks down and catches fire? How are you going to get emergency services to those vehicles? So there's a lot of scenarios that could go wrong that you have to think about. And then also, as managed, communicating early and often to the public. There's so many different platforms that you can put a message out on. It's just about getting the right message to as many people as possible. FHWA played a pretty central role in making sure that the state DOTs were talking with one another, and also some of the local agencies that were involved. It's all about sharing information, making sure that folks aren't working in silos. As I mentioned early on, the eclipse planning doesn't, and the eclipse itself, it doesn't end at borders. We had folks that were coming across the international borders. We had people that were crossing state borders. So making sure that everybody is on board and have similar plans is extremely important. So activity one that we focused on, I'll go through a couple of these, but activity one was just engaging with external entities and producing some outreach materials or gathering outreach materials. Some of these were involved. Some of these involved getting materials that were put together from the after actions and lessons learned of 2017. There were some presentations. Specifically, Kentucky DOT did some great after actions. You can still find those online. That referenced lessons learned. Kentucky experienced some crowding in some very rural cities and towns, just from the influx of people traveling in, and it helped educate us better on how to deal with that. Activity two was identification and compilation of those solar eclipse resources. Outside of the state DOTs, there were a number of nonprofits and private organizations and universities that were putting together information on the solar eclipse. NASA had a page dedicated to it, so we partnered with them. It was all about getting all of the good resources that we could well before the event itself, and making them available to stakeholders. Activity 3 for us was putting together a dedicated solar eclipse webpage. And this webpage is still available. If you go to the operations website at fhwa.dot.gov, navigate to the traffic incident management page, you'll find the eclipse page there, and it still has all of our preparation information, a message from our administrator. We were fully on board with this. We were making sure that we got as much information out as possible. That stuff will still be there. This isn't going to be our last eclipse. It might be the last for a while, but this stuff, the idea is that we'll continue building on these lessons learned and put them in a one-stop shop. Activity 4 was performing a total solar eclipse webinar in conjunction with NOCoE, very similar to what we did today. We had a webinar that helped, we got a bunch of stakeholders involved, including NITEC up in, the New York to Canada border crossing. We had the city of Buffalo. We had a number of state DOTs participating and shared their perspectives on what they're planning and what they expect. This really helped to educate some of the agencies out there who maybe didn't have a good idea of what they were going to be doing, or maybe they may have been on the fence about how they were going to respond to the eclipse. This was actually a very popular webinar. We had 700 total views and 500 unique participants during that webinar. There's a recording available. If you go to NOCoE's website, you'll find the recording there, but also we have a link in the slides here. It's on YouTube. So if you're interested in hearing from some of the stakeholders and how they were preparing for the eclipse, feel free to check that out. Activity 5 was almost immediately a follow-up. We did an in-person peer exchange in St. Louis, Missouri. There were 32 participants attending from 10 state DOTs that were impacted by that were going to be affected by the 2024 solar eclipse, plus some FHWA staff supporting this, as well as 3 local agencies and the National Weather Service. And as mentioned, the attendees presented on some agency approaches and how they were planning and preparing for the eclipse. So preliminary findings of the eclipse are, they're pretty similar to what we saw in 2017 in terms of, yes, we did know that there were going to be impacts to traffic. There were going to be backups and queues. No matter how many lanes you have on the highway, there's always going to be traffic when you have a large event like that, where everybody's trying to get to the same place at the same time and then also leave the same place at the same time. That's to be expected. But I do think that we found it to be a little bit more successful as far as getting messaging out to the public and getting people to the event sooner rather than later, and getting them home sooner rather than later. There was a lot of information that was shared between the state DOTs. There was a lot of collaboration. I think that this was also very successful. There was a lot of state-to-state talking and cross-border collaboration prior to the event and during the event, as well as how we were getting the messages out to travelers through 511 systems. And then as well as the forecast, something that we did notice that going into this, and something that we kind of anticipated was that we weren't going to have 100% clear skies. It's hard to get that as much as we prayed for it, but there were some areas that had cloud coverage, and we did notice that there were some folks that traveled outside of their originally planned area to get to areas with clear skies. And that obviously can present new challenges and complicate things. So these graphics here show some of the most impacted roadways. The data that I'm showing you for the most part is going to be from the National Performance Management Research data set at the DOT. The graphic on the left there is going to be Google Maps. As we go through this, you'll see the source at the bottom, but most of it's going to be coming from the NPM RDS. As you see, there was quite a few segments that were significantly impacted along the path of totality there. That's to be expected. The The information that we pulled also queried not only the 2 Mondays following the eclipse, but also the 2 Mondays after the eclipse. It gave us an idea of what that baseline was. That way we could understand any impacts going into the eclipse. So as I mentioned, we pulled information for the 2 Mondays before and the 2 Mondays after. What we found was that the average speeds on those most impacted roadways, those segments that I just showed you, were on average 24.2 miles per hour slower the day of the event, as opposed to the average the Mondays prior and the Mondays after the event. So that's a significant drop, but you also have to consider the millions of people that either lived in the areas or drove to the event sites, that were on the roads those days. If you look at our network as a whole, the average, the Mondays before and the Mondays after, it really wasn't that much different. The speeds the day of the eclipse on the entire interstate network were only 4 miles per hour slower the day of the event, as opposed to those Mondays before and after. So as I mentioned, all of this stuff leads up to future events and future plan special events planning. The solar eclipse kind of gave us an idea of what the payoffs from the 2017 eclipse would bring, and it gave us some more of a solid foundation going into some of these future activities. I have these listed up here. The 2026 World Cup is it's coming up. There's already a lot of planning underway. There's going to be a lot of people traveling for that. There's going to be a lot of international travel for that, and that's going to have a regional impact, as well as the 2028 Olympics. Both of those events are being looked at right now, and we're actively participating in the planning for those and making sure that those go off without any issues. On top of all that, we're going to be putting out some documentation and some reports as far as the 2024 solar eclipse. We're doing a case study to document impacts and agency activities, some of the stuff that I just talked about. And then we're also going to be putting together a final report that kind of expands on the case study, and it documents our outreach campaign. It's also going to have anecdotes and statistics and analysis of what the states dealt with and what they observed during the eclipse. If you have any information that you'd like to share with us about the eclipse, or lessons learned, pictures, anything at all, feel free to contact us. The contact will actually be David Johnson. He is the Managing Disruptions to Operations team lead, which involves traffic incident management, road weather management, and work zone management. So with that said, hopefully I'm back on track here. That'll wrap up the solar eclipse planning from the Federal Highway Administration side of things. I am going to pass it over to Team Indiana next. It's going to be a presentation from both Indiana DOT as well as Purdue University. First up will be Mike Nichols. I'm going to read off everybody's bios, and then we'll go into the presentations. But first up will be Mike Nichols, who is the Statewide Director of Emergency Planning and Response for the Indiana Department of Transportation. He has served in this role for nearly 4 years after a 32-year career with the Indiana State Police, where he served in various capacities. Apologize for that. Where he served in various capacities such as training sergeant, district commander, and overseeing event planning and large-scale response. Following Mike will be Rahul Sakhare, who is a transportation research engineer with the Joint Transportation Research Program at Purdue University. He earned his PhD in civil engineering. Apologies there. I was reading off my slide. Adam.
Sorry about that, Jeremy.
You're fine.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so, we'll pick back up. Anyways, Rahul is... He earned his PhD in civil engineering from Purdue University in May 2023. His area of expertise spans transportation, big data analytics, work zone safety, traffic shockwave theory, and developing scalable performance measures. Jiraj Desai is a transportation research engineer with the Joint Transportation Research Program at Purdue University. He received his PhD in civil engineering from Purdue. He specializes in developing and analyzing big data-driven visualizations and applications that combine diverse data sets and help draw actionable insights, aiding public and private sector stakeholders in operational decision-making and resource allocation. And then lastly is Darcy Bullock. He's the Lyles Family Professor of Civil Engineering at Purdue University and serves as the Director of the Joint Transportation Research Program. Darcy is a registered professional engineer in Indiana and has 30 years of experience working closely with academia, transportation agencies, and private sector partners in the area of transportation systems and big data. With that said, I think that you have us queued up for the next one there, Adam, so I'll hand it off to you and Mike Nichols.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeremy. This is Mike Nichols with Indiana DOT. And just a kind of quick after action of what we did to prepare and run through the total solar eclipse. To give you an idea, in Indiana, the eclipse started at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Totality was from 3:01 to 3:12, and it ended approximately 4:30 p.m. Next slide, please. So our staffing, our state of Indiana Emergency Operations Center is administered by the Department of Homeland Security, and we staff the ESF-1 transportation desk. And this staffing started Saturday, April 6th at 10 and concluded Monday evening at 7 p.m. We have 2 traffic management centers in Indiana. The secondary one is located in Gary, Indiana, up northwest, a suburb of Chicago, and it had limited hours. But then our Indianapolis-based traffic management center is a 24/7 operation. And what we did was we set up a traffic operations center to support the TMC in Indianapolis and Gary. And in that operations center, we had AECOM as our contractor that runs the TMC, the dispatch part of it. We had technical engineers running our cameras, signals, and message boards. We had traffic operations people and planning. And then we also had other state agencies. We had the Indiana State Police, their command, as well as special operations. Indiana Department of Homeland Security had a liaison in there. Our Integrated Public Safety Commission emergency response. In Indiana, we have a state-run 800 megahertz radio system. And so they stationed a liaison in with us, as well as having 2 cells on wheels and mobile repeater stations stationed 2 different geographically located areas in the state for quick response. And then we also had Indiana Department of Natural Resources, law enforcement, or conservation officers, what we call them here, representative. Because in the totality area, we have several state parks. And so they had been, the lodges had been sold out for about a year and a half, and campsites opened up fully 6 months ahead of time and were sold out within a couple weeks. So next slide, please. So one of the things that we did was the NDOT GIS section created a situational awareness map that we made available to all first responders and dispatch centers. And what we did was we tracked the state parks and rest park capacities as updated by our traffic operations center that we had set up. This also, we populated it with the traffic flow, as well as hospitals, schools, which most of them were on an e-learning day or closed. We had pushed that messaging out early. But then also we had private and public events populated on this map. And the way we gathered those was through a partnership with the Indiana State Tourism folks. They had on their website, you could go in and populate your event, and that could be everything from, hey, I can park 10 cars in my front yard, to large-scale event at Indiana University in Bloomington where they had William Shatner come, Captain Kirk from Star Trek. And so we could populate those events as well. Next map, please, or next slide. So our Traffic Operations Center, we broke Indiana up into 5 geographical areas: Northwest, Northeast, Central, Southeast, Southwest. And each pod was staffed by someone with the Indiana DOT and the Indiana State Police. Each pod had multi-camera statewide viewability of their area, and then also the situational awareness map for that section. Teams chat was utilized for situational awareness between our folks in the field, the supervisors, our representatives at the ESF1 desk at the state EOC, as well as the AECOM dispatchers and state police. And then also DNR had their folks on our team's chat. The intent was to be able to dispatch maintenance teams from here to assist law enforcement or locals with any assistance they would need should an incident occur, necessitating redirection of traffic or traffic maintenance. We had 2 operators in the Traffic Operations Center updating the status of the state parks and the welcome centers. We did for capacity. We did not do that for all the special events or private events. That would have just been a nightmare logistically. Next slide, please. So our maintenance field operations, for the most part, we had them active from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we had 17 welcome centers or rest parks in the path of totality. And we had crews out there. Once those facilities filled, then we did a hard closure with barricades and trucks. And we had portable message boards a mile before the closure announcing that. We populated it on that situational awareness map. We also populated it on our 511IN map for the public viewing. And then we kept those closed until after totality. And then people started moving. We did not want to have to deal logistically with, the one out, one in thing. So we pulled our maintenance people for the day of the eclipse. And so what we did is we had 120 teams staged at NDOT facilities or near interstates. And these teams consisted of dump trucks with attenuators, arrow boards, message boards, cones, barrels, etc. I'm happy to say that we did not have to use any of them, which was a pleasant surprise. Next slide, please, Adam. The keys to our success, the long-range planning. We actually started meeting at a state level 2 years prior, and then bringing in state agency collaboration, and then going out and meeting with local agencies. Put a lot of miles on the cars in that 2 years, meeting with people. The weather that day, the week leading up to it, we thought southwestern Indiana, where a lot of our rural areas are, a lot of 2-lane roads, a lot of state parks. Initially, that was going to be overcast and rainy. And then our fear was the day of, a lot of people would be migrating to the eastern part of the state. However, the day of the eclipse, the weather was perfect all over the state. So messaging, there was combined messaging, and the clip art there was a collaborative effort with the state police. And the message was arrive early, stay put, leave late. And that morning, pre-eclipse, traffic seemed to be minimal. And I don't want to take away from the Purdue folks because they did the the analysis of that. But our folks coming into our operations center said traffic was a lot lighter than normal pre-eclipse. The Traffic Operations Center, like I said, supported the Traffic Management Center. And then we had the statewide resources at one place that we could dispatch out. The local events controlled at a local level, and we deconflicted a few issues prior to the event. Really got to hand it to the local agencies. Hats off to them because they were the rock stars in this. They dealt with the issues there. We had a couple calls on traffic, and our guys running the timing for the traffic control lights remotely were able to mess with the timings a little bit or adjust them, I guess would be a technical term. And they were able to get the traffic cleared up and flowing. The other thing that helped was with our technical people in traffic management monitoring traffic. And as you'll see, I-65 going from Indianapolis up to Northwest Indiana, Gary, headed back towards the Chicago area, got filled up, and they were pretty busy up there. So our message board folks could watch that, and then they would change messaging appropriately. So it was a great collaborative effort internally in NDOT, bringing different entities together, but then also, like I said, the other state agencies and the local agencies. What we thought was going to be a long, drawn-out day, we actually secured people by 7, 8 o'clock that evening. And we just had traffic issues at that point. So it was a great success for us at NDOT. Thank you. That's what I have.
All right, thank you, Mike. Darcy, are you guys ready?
Yep. So I will just let me click through my. Perfect. Can you give me a thumbs up? You can see the screen, Jeremy.
Looks good.
Perfect. Okay, so I will be brief. Mike gave a great presentation. I think it built on Mike McClelland and Jeremy's. I think the key on any of these is plan for the worst, hope for the best. Our role in this was to look at the data on the after action of the eclipse. Jeremy had several good slides showing the eclipse. One of the things that we have done probably for the last 4 or 5 years in Indiana is we do after actions on every significant snowstorm. So this was a pretty easy technique to scale at a national level. In fact, we've done that. So I think Mike McClelland's point earlier that communication and multi-state coordination on hurricanes is important. So when we looked at this, we tried to look at this from a multi-state perspective. And Gerard and Rahul are going to give some really nice examples on that. A couple of the key message I want to kind of get out up front on this is our role on this was Mike and colleagues were working on the planning and coordination of agencies. We were there looking at the data. In general, whether you're looking at a winter storm, a hurricane, or an eclipse, traffic congestion, you worry about location, severity, and duration. So the techniques that you're going to see here that we used with connected vehicle data scale equally well to large winter events and hurricanes. Probably the interesting thing was that Indiana was a destination state, partly because of the advertisement, partly because of the weather. It turned out the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was the largest designated viewing site in the world. But Jeremy, as you know, Mike, as you know, relatively speaking, this was a small crowd by Indianapolis Motor Speedway standards, so relatively small blip. But there was nice weather and good turnout, good for the Indiana economy. So just to kind of give you some images from the ITS cameras, the roadway cameras in Indiana, it did get dark quite quickly. It is pretty amazing when you look at those roadway cameras over 2 minutes, how quick they got dark. And with that, I am the warm-up act for what I think is going to be the cool content that Gerard and Rahul are going to share.
Okay, in this next section, we'll cover basically the 3 data sources that we use for the analysis to monitor traffic: connected vehicles, roadside ITS cameras, and then commercial vehicle dash cams. So diving right into it, the first data set is connected trucks from OmniTrack. So for this data set, we get about 200 million drives a day with speed, geolocation, heading, and timestamp, and then a reporting frequency of mostly 10 seconds, which is really good for this kind of monitoring. Just showing a 1-minute snapshot of the data from Tuesday, January 30th for nationwide, and you can see just using 1 minute of truck data, most of the major roadways light up, as do the major metropolitan areas, Indianapolis here, Chicago, and Dallas. One of the things you'll be seeing in this presentation is a spatiotemporal traffic speed heat map. So this is just a quick video showing individual trajectories of connected vehicles passing through a work zone on I-69 from mile marker 245 to 260, going northbound. So every line here represents a connected vehicle. And if you see the dot that's moving along, that's the current position of the vehicle, and it is colored by the speed at which it's traveling. So less than 45 miles per hour congested speeds and free flow speeds in green, as shown over here. So you can see clearly speed slowing down as vehicles enter the work zone. So just to give you a brief overview of what heat maps look like and how to read them. So mile markers on the y-axis, 245 to 260, and then time of day on the x-axis, so from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Another graphic we'll see along with the heat map on the top is the congestion ticker. So the congestion ticker is basically a collapsed version of the heat map showing minute by minute what's the number of miles for this section of roadway that were congested. So we're comparing here I-70 westbound about 40 miles, and it sees peak congestion of 7.7 miles. So this is how the section looks on the heat map when it's congested: pink, red, and yellow speeds less than 45. And this is how that congestion built up starting about 1 p.m. ending at 5 p.m. The penetration, so the connected truck data, roughly we see about 1 to 5% of sample penetration. Again, at night, we see the connected trucks really fill in the data gaps when we have very few passenger vehicles traveling. That's when connected trucks are very valuable. So you see these early morning hours is when the penetration is very high. The last data set we used is commercial vehicle dash cam images from Vision. So just showing an example here, and I'll let Rahul go into a deep dive on how we use these images. But this is a brief map that shows a dash cam coverage across the US. So Rahul, correct me if I'm wrong, but during peak weekday hours, we see about 30,000 vehicles active sending these images. So again, similar to the connected trucks, we see these dash cam images have really good coverage on all major roadways and in major areas. And finally is the Indiana ITS cameras. Darcy showed a brief preview of this, but this is what the roadside ITS cameras look like. And this is a view from one of them. Over 750 cameras statewide operated by INDOT. And we capture images from these maybe every 2 to 3 minutes, which allows us to do these after actions really quickly. In the interest of time, I'll go quick, but this is a congestion ticker for nationwide interstate miles operating below 45 miles per hour. So this is about 98,000 directional miles of roadway. If you see all 50 states, excluding Alaska, we see the congestion on Eclipse Day was pretty much lower than the last 2 Mondays. So because of the 50 states and the totality only passing through 13 states, we don't get to tease out the insights. But now when we dive into only the states that the eclipse passed through, so the same 13 states on the path, from Texas all the way through Maine, we see the peak condition on the day of the eclipse was definitely higher than the last 2 Mondays. And then very quick summary tabulated from Texas to Maine, the number of miles of interstate within that state, which are within the path of totality, and then how congestion changed between the prior 2 Mondays and the day of the eclipse, as well as how mile hours changed. So interesting to note here is Texas and Oklahoma are the two states which saw a reduction in congestion, while most of the other states saw an increase. And I'm highlighting 4 states here, which we'll go into detail later on, but just showing a brief ticker for Texas. Again, lower congestion on the day of the eclipse than the last 2 Mondays. And Indiana, on the day of the eclipse, Monday, April 8, we see about 175 miles congested, higher than the last 2 Mondays. And the 4 states that I highlighted, Texas, Arkansas, Indiana, and Ohio. So if you see this overlay plot, the red line is what congestion looked like on the day of the eclipse by hour of day. And the blue and green lines are for the previous 2 Mondays. So Texas, again, the peak was lower than the past 2 Mondays, but the other 3, we see peaks almost doubling or more than doubling for the day of the eclipse. So just a little bit of foreshadowing on what we'll be doing, what Rahul will be covering for his deep dive into the selected states. So over to you, Rahul.
Thank you, Jarash. What I'm going to do is take a little deeper dive into heat maps, what Darcy talked about earlier, location, duration, and severity. We showed some of the high-level statewide statistics earlier, but how these graphics, particularly heat map, let us talk about specific scenarios. So once again, the horizontal axis is time of the day, the vertical axis is mile marker, and the colors are green is good, traffic is flowing at a good speed on interstate, and pink and reds have lower speeds. So here it's showing 8 days in Indiana, interstate I-65 border to border, so 262 miles of the interstate. Top one is northbound, so all the traffic, the individual vehicles are going from bottom to top. Bottom one is southbound, so vehicles are going from top to bottom. Now we see the last day is the eclipse day, so 1 week prior to eclipse and eclipse day. The traffic on the interstate pretty much flowing, free flow, green conditions, except for that 110 mile marker Indianapolis area where the speeds are slowing down a little bit. Now we come to the eclipse day. Now I'm going to zoom down to the 3 days, the day of eclipse, the day before, and the day after, and look at that location, severity, and impact. Now the day before, we start seeing some of the inbound traffic coming in from Chicago. So we started seeing impact mid-afternoon, late evening hours, those pink stripes, vehicles coming down, having those conditions. Similarly, on northbound also, we saw some impact of potential traffic coming from Louisville area and a 2-hour highway closure shown by that white stripe near mile marker 20. Mike earlier talked about national highway closure. So some of these graphics help us identify some of that closure looking at scale. Coming to the day of the eclipse, the black dotted lines show the path of totality. So potentially everyone trying to get inside that path of totality to look at the totality. Just before the eclipse, 3 p.m. time in Indiana, we saw inbound traffic both from northbound and southbound direction. At the time of totality, I think congestion was at its lowest. We see no congested traffic anywhere. And right after the totality, we start seeing the outbound traffic growing. Now in the I-65 northbound, we saw impact about 40 miles from 3 p.m. until 9, 10 p.m. That area highlighted there. One of the things that we noticed was, which was unexpected, the impact the next day, the day after the eclipse. A lot of the people that stayed the night on both the nights, the Sunday and Monday night, were trying to check out on Tuesday, and that caused that congestion on I-65 while they were going out probably towards Chicago area. One key thing was the inbound traffic. The congestion was seen up until the edge of the totality. So everyone was just trying to get inside and not really wanting or bothered about getting to the center of those totality areas. And in terms of time of totality, I think the center had about 3 to 4 minutes, whereas the edge had totality lasted for about 2 to 2.5 minutes. So not much of a difference. However, when the right after the totality, the outbound traffic sort of originated from the center of that path. Everyone that was coming in for different events, trying to leave right after. Now I'm going to step through a few other select interstate. This is I-14 Arkansas. We see about 60-mile impact in westbound post totality for about 6 hours, shown by that call out there. Some impact northbound, not as significant. This is I-55 in Missouri, 80-mile impact in northbound from 3 to up until 11 midnight after totality. I-64 in Illinois, 30-mile impact coming in. I-24 in Kentucky, about 40 miles impact for 6 hours. And a little bit of impact the day after. The next thing I'm going to show is some of the vehicle dash camera images that we were able to pull together for specific situational awareness. As Mike mentioned, several advisory on those messaging boards, no parking on ramps, notifications to motorists. However, we did see some stops on shoulders, ramps, not ideal. And these are the images as the truck is going through, we're able to get those dash cams. So one particular case was exit 188 in southbound direction. And this is just outside the path of totality. So our hypothesis was people that got caught in that traffic trying to get towards the path of, inside the totality had to bail out last minute, park on the shoulders and ramp. So I'm going to step through. We see the ramp being completely occupied with parked vehicles all the way across that exit ramp. I'm going to step through probably not an ideal parking location for the truck, and as well as that vehicle that was right behind. Driver seen opening the door right there, probably very dangerous situation. So a lot of the awareness was circulated earlier, but probably stricter advisory, particularly closer to around the border of those paths, is critical. And some more images of parked vehicles on the shoulder, viewing the totality just before. With that, I'm gonna bring back the summary table. Before that, all of the graphics and the numbers that showed in this presentation are right now under peer review process. If you would like a copy of that sort of published paper, please put your email address in the chat, and once it's published, we'll be sending it out to everyone that's want to take a look at these. I'm going to bring back the table that summarized sort of impact for all of the states along the path of totality. 2 states, Texas and Oklahoma, saw decrease. 3 other states saw moderate change in the congested mile hours, and the rest of the states saw increase in the mile hours. So on the states that saw the increase, we observed about 67% increase in the total mile hours congested on the eclipse day. With that, I think that's the end of the presentation. We'll hand it back to Jeremy for any questions that popped up in the chat.
Sure thing. If you guys could stop sharing so I could take over. Yeah, if there's any questions, Adam, perhaps you could field those to the group.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a couple questions come in. The first is, any idea why peak congestion was lower in Texas? Was it due to cloud cover that day?
The potential reasons that we thought was, yes, cloud cover was probably the key one that people decided to go to other sections of the states, as well as the advisory coming into the eclipse from work from home, from businesses, potential traffic anticipated, and advisory shared by agencies probably prohibited some of those motorists coming out on the eclipse day.
Thank you. And then, did you see any accidents or fatalities reported based on, motors making stops on shoulders or any other abnormal behavior?
Nothing significant that we came across.
But I think just to chime in, that I think Rahul had some good photos on that. I think one of the lessons learned here is we were a little surprised how much the side of the interstate was used for ad hoc viewing picnic areas.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Yeah, that's the rest of the questions. We have one more that came in the chat box. Just about more on the crashes. Was there a difference from the norm and the number of roadway crashes that contributed to any of the changes?
I don't think we've run those numbers. One day is really hard to pull something out. We don't have access to all the other states. I can't say anything remarkable. Mike Nichols, I might volley that over to him. He might have, usually you wait 60 days or so to run those numbers so all the reports come in. So over to Mike Nichols to see if he's got anything to add.
Talking to law enforcement, specifically state police, and then Tippecanoe County Sheriff's Department, which is located up near Lafayette, which was along I-65. It's Purdue's located in West Lafayette. Talking to them, serious crashes were minimal. We didn't have any of those. There were some rear end crashes or lesser crashes, that more property damage type things. Overall numbers, though, I think were down. And I kind of equate it to winter weather. When you get, an inch of snow, everybody's still driving like an idiot. When you get 6 inches of snow and the awareness is out there and everybody's talking about this bad weather, or in this case, everybody's talking about the eclipse, then I think that awareness, it's kind of like at the forefront of people's thoughts. So just my personal observation, I guess.
Thank you, Mike, and to the team at Purdue. Jeremy, I think that's our questions that are that were submitted as of now. If anybody else submits one, I will chime in.
Appreciate it. Yeah, also continue putting questions in the Q&A. We can always answer those in the chat pod if necessary. We're running out of time here, so I'm going to wrap things up with just some updates and closing remarks from the FHWA side of things. There's a lot going on here, so I always try and call out the resources that we have available. Just the road weather management team alone, we put together a lot of tools and guides and fact sheets. But here's some recent ones that we've put out. Anything that from our climate resilience risk assessment tool and guide that we're working on, all the way to automated vehicles in adverse weather. We did some testing of some automated vehicles in a variety of conditions on a test track, and that is the final report that shows how those performed and provides maybe some insight into next steps. If you go to the road weather management page under the ops.fhwa.dot.gov, you'll find all of these and many more. We're always putting out good information. Again, if you know me, I'm always pushing grant opportunities. There's a lot of money that gets left on the table every year, and there's a lot of grant opportunities out there. There's no reason why, if you're a public agency, that you can't apply for some of these. Just read through the NOFOs, or the Notice of Funding Opportunities, to understand what those grant opportunities are about and perhaps how they might fit into your operations. One of them that we're focused on right now is the SMART grant. It's strengthening mobility and revolutionizing transportation. This one has quite a bit of money. I can't remember the dollar amount, but there's several $1 million per project that they're funding. There's going to be two phases. One is kind of a prototyping, and then the second is a demonstration phase. And there's funding for both of those phases. As mentioned there at the bottom, the city of Fort Worth, Texas, was awarded an FY23 Smart Stage 1 Planning and Prototyping Grant to deploy a network of ground, low altitude, and roadway sensors for micro-weather modeling to improve users of the Fort Worth Smart Port. And again, too, this is not just limited to highways. This can apply to ports, airports, transit, any mode of transportation. So I encourage you to go to that website there on the screen and check it out. This is administered by the US DOT. It's not an FHWA grant. Grant opportunity number 2 that we're pushing is the Accelerating Innovation Deployment Demonstration Program, also known as AID. This is an FHWA grant. The mission there, or at least the goal, is to accelerate the implementation and adoption of innovation in highway transportation. There's been a number of road weather related projects that have been funded using this. Specifically there at the bottom is Connecticut DOT. They implemented in their management system using global positioning system, or GPS AVL units, to support the restructuring of the agency's response to road weather related events. And then New Jersey, they had a weather savvy roads pilot, which is one of our programs that we push to remotely provide real-time information of road maintenance fleet to traffic management centers. That's just 2 of the grant opportunities. There's many more out there. And just keep an eye on the US DOT grants page. And as those opportunities come open, some of them are recurring and they'll occur at specific times of the year. Those will get posted on there, along with what it takes to apply and how much you can potentially get from those. As far as new events that are coming up, I do want to call out our big one. This is our annual stakeholder meeting for 2024. It's going to be occurring September 10th and September 11th in New Orleans, Louisiana. Invitation, it's open to anyone who's interested to attend, but FHWA specifically will reimburse up to 3 staff members per state to attend. So if you're interested in attending and seeing presentations on any range of road weather related topics, whether it's winter weather as has been mentioned here, or even tropical weather that we covered earlier in the presentation, anything's going to be covered. We have a lot of great stuff that's going to be packed into those 2 days. So just reach out to either myself or David Johnson, if you're interested, and we'll get you some information. And then lastly, I think Adam mentioned this at the top of the meeting, but this road weather spotlight series that we're doing today is recurring. We're trying to do them every 2 months. The next one's going to take place on September 4th, 2024 from 1 to 2:30 p.m. And the topic's going to be kind of preparing for the winter weather season. We're still working out some of the details on that, but you can go ahead and register. And I think Adam's going to put that link in the chat there. So again, if you're interested in attending these, we're going to cover any range of topics during this Spotlight webinar series. And I want to thank NOCoE again for hosting it. It's been a big help for us. And that's it. Thank you for joining us today. We covered quite a bit today, and I know that it was a very short amount of time to cover all of the information that we covered. So if you're interested in any of the topics that we talked about today, or getting to know more about planned special events or road weather management within FHWA, please reach out to us. David's contact information is on there. He's our team leader here in the Office of Operations. You can subscribe to our program updates page there. You'll get newsletters, you'll get updates on what's happening, and then also subscribe to NOCoE. As I mentioned, they're pretty instrumental in getting a lot of the webinars that we do and a lot of the content that we put together out to folks that are not just the normal core users. So feel free to register for all that stuff. I really want to thank our presenters today for Team Indiana. Mike, Darcy, Rahul, Jiraj, you guys did a great job putting all that stuff together and showcasing how Indiana planned for the event and what some of the outcomes were and some of the observations. I think that was really insightful. Mike McClelland with FHWA, I appreciate you showing what you've been working on in the background. I know some of these people who are the road weather practitioners may not see as much of that stuff, but I'm hoping that maybe it sparked some interest, and maybe we'll get some people that are interested in hurricane response, hurricane prep, and maybe you'll get some people reaching out to you. So I appreciate all of the presenters. I appreciate NOCoE, and thank you guys who attended, everyone who sat through the presentation today, for your time. That's what keeps us going, is getting good information out to folks who are really wanting it. So with that said, I think we are done, and I will let you guys go. Thank you.